Thank you for joining this webinar by the Association Specialists. We have designed this short webinar for our clients to take home some key points and ideas for running their annual general meetings, AGMs. My name is Thalia and I'm the Director of Productivity here at TAS. I have worked at TAS over 10 years, and in that time, I have been involved in probably more AGMs than I could count.
Hi folks, my name's Aaron Lucas. I am a Senior Manager here at TAS. I've been with the business for about 3 or 4 years now, probably about 6 years total in association management, along with what I suspect is nearly 20 years cumulative time as a volunteer board member. I know what it's like to be you. This webinar will give you, as clients, some top takeaways that will help you plan and run a streamlined AGM without going into all of the nitty-gritty.
So we have quite a few points to get through, but one of the most important ones we'll start with is being organised. This is basically the key to running an AGM, and it's a recurring theme that you're going to hear throughout. So as a meeting, the agenda is prescribed by your constitution, as Aaron mentioned just before. Organising the meeting content should be very straightforward. It's all basically laid out in your constitution. Being organised starts at the end of the previous year's AGM. So definitely do not start planning your AGM a couple of months in advance. You can start this 12 months before, and that's what we would recommend. Make yourself some notes. In particular, record anything that didn't go to plan or exactly how you wanted at any AGM so that you can use those takeaways for next year. Read your constitution, understand how each relevant clause works with others to create the AGM environment, and copy these clauses you need out into a separate document if it helps. This is how you develop your step-by-step plan to running an AGM.
So as Thalia mentioned, the content of your AGM is contained in the Constitution. You still do want to map out a plan based on those constitutional requirements. Some things that you might want to look for: when does the AGM have to be held by? Usually that's a set amount of time after the end of your association's financial year. What is the notice period for the meeting, for sending the notice of meeting, and is that impacted by any special resolutions on your agenda? What is the method of calling for director nominations and deadline for acceptance of those nominations? And when do you have to send the notice of meeting, and what else do members want to see with that notice? For example, do you want to send the notice of meeting and have a finalised annual report to send at the same time? These, though, are pretty much your main starting points for planning the AGM.
Don't just assume because what it was done last year that it's correct. We have had new clients come to us before, and they've had all their AGMs templated and given us their past documents that they've used, and it doesn't align with the Constitution and it's not following the requirements. So don't always assume that just because it was done before, that's the way you should be doing it.
An important thing with an AGM, more so than any other meeting, is to stick to time. You really want to have this go for the time that you advised, for the amount of time that you told members it's going to go for. The meeting needs to keep moving along and stick to the agenda. To help you with that, don't just have the agenda, make yourself a run sheet that has timings for each agenda item and to help keep you moving. Ensure that all involved, including and especially your board members, receive a copy of that run sheet.
Scripting the meeting, so important. Like, why wouldn't you be as prepared as possible, which was our original point, and sticking to time. When it comes to moving and seconding motions, rearrange that with board members. Have a plan of who is going to stick their hand up to propose and second. Get on the front foot with that. Make it go as quickly, streamlined as possible. And limit open discussion where possible as well. Most of the time, constitutions don't require open discussion at an annual general meeting, so you can keep questions and other business out of an AGM to make it for a smoother and quicker meeting. You can also ask for questions to be tabled at the meeting in advance. So you've already got a plan of how many questions they're going to be, what your answers are going to be. Again, being prepared and helping you stick to time. If interruptions are a regular occurrence at your AGMs, you can consider other ways of engaging your members throughout the year so that they can see and be heard and don't only see the AGM as that one opportunity for them to ask these questions. If a meeting is hybrid and you have access to the meeting platform, use the chat functions to remind speakers of time remaining. Again, you may not have to do that if you have a script, but lots of little keys. Sometimes people just do tend to go off on, different trails. And generally, AGMs are a procedural meeting with boxes to tick off. Your agenda does not have to be extensive. Keep it light. Do what the Constitution requires, and you're well on your way to an efficient meeting. One of the things that does take a really long time at an AGM is voting. So we do have a couple of really key points for voting at an AGM. Firstly, who can vote? That sounds really simple, but that is so key to being prepared for an AGM. Who can vote? Firstly, it's determined by your constitution, so have a look there. But most importantly, if non-voting members are allowed or able to attend the AGM, they must not be able to vote. And we do see this from time to time at lots of face-to-face meetings, especially when clients run their AGMs in conjunction with their annual conference. You can get anyone really walking into the room. Make sure that you have a system in place to ensure that only members are voting.
And this is where good voting facilitation is important. One thing I want to strongly recommend is that if at the end of your director nomination period, it becomes apparent that you are going to have to run a competitive election, please try and do it before the meeting so that at the meeting you are announcing the results. Forms like Election Buddy, True Vote's another one that I've seen before. They're really robust voting platforms, very secure and very, very easy to use for you as the person setting up the election, but also for your members who are voting. There's polling options that can be used for simple voting. One of the pitfalls with the Zoom polls, though, is that you will actually show that it's possible for you to show the results to the whole meeting. Very generally speaking, it's probably not a nice thing to do to share the election results for a person. For a motion like accepting minutes, it's not really a problem. But when you're talking about announcing results for a person, someone might be a little bit could be disappointed if they don't achieve the position they're nominated for, and could be even more disappointed if they find out they lost by a landslide. So,
be considerate.
Be considerate, exactly. Whatever voting method is chosen, try and make sure that it won't slow down or delay the meeting more than necessary.
Another key thing that we'd like to mention for an AGM, and this sounds very simple, is what to look for. What do you look for when there's an AGM? Technically, there are so many things you need to look for, but to simplify it down, the only things you really, really need to look for is checking that your papers and processes are in line with the Constitution. As long as you have done that, the AGM will go ahead and it will be accepted, and the association can move on with its strategic goals for the next year. Are there any typical personalities that you might need to manage during the meeting? We don't always like to mention this one, but from time to time it happens, and it's important to look out for that because that could be very detrimental to your meeting. Make sure that there are more registered attendees than quorum required. So your quorum will be outlined in your constitution. I have been to an AGM before where we haven't met quorum and we've had to reconvene. It's not a good look, and it's also not ideal for your board members or an administration having to do everything for us. And lastly, check that the registration for your annual general meeting are people who are eligible. So people who are allowed to attend, people who are members, and people who can vote. It's much better if everyone present in the room is eligible to attend and vote. Just makes it a bit easier for you. So those are probably the main things to look for.
So another thing to keep in mind for your AGM is that it is really an opportunity for a board to have some really open communication with their members. It's also a really, really good time for the board to be explaining things that have happened during the year, why, and perhaps take questions on notice that can be answered later. So it's a chance to be transparent, to explain things that have happened during the year, to overcome any negativity that you might have heard throughout the year, summarising all of the updates that you've had, and acknowledging perhaps where there might have been pain points during the year, and proposing solutions so that they don't happen again. And sometimes the most difficult piece of information for a member to receive is that the financial results for the association show a deficit. Now, deficit for non-profits isn't bad. You probably want to try and make a little bit of money each year. You know, non-profit doesn't mean the association can't be generating revenue. It kind of needs to be. But, you know, it can happen that a financial results result in a deficit. This is actually a really good chance to relate your strategic plan to your actions to the financial impacts. That's a really, really good opportunity to tie all that together. Maybe you took some risks, some calculated risks that didn't pay off. But again, this is an opportunity for you to explain that to your members and outline what you might do differently next time. It's really important to explain what happened and how it will be rectified or viewed in the future to ensure success. Use statistics, real examples, and taking questions. Like I said, probably take them on notice if you can be really useful. But real numbers and real examples will help you a lot.
We recently saw at an AGM that the board and CEO had prepared an FAQ document. And we have encouraged this in the past to some clients. Some of our associations don't do this, and you don't necessarily need to, but it's just a little bit more of a risk management strategy. Preparing an FAQ document, if you are going to be taking live questions, it can be helpful because your board members might not always be great public speakers or confident to get up in front of, hundreds of members, although I'm sure you're not going to get that many to an AGM, but you never know. An FAQ document can basically lay out questions that you think you're going to get about financials, about the sort of strategies that the board took throughout the year, about the number of members, anything that might be controversial, anything that you just want to be prepared for, that if you do get a hairy question or any question, in general, you want your board members to be up there and to be confident in answering. So preparing an FAQ document of the main points that have happened throughout the year, perhaps maybe from your annual report, if you produce one, or anything that, as a board, you can sit down and go, we might get asked about this. Document it down, have a response planned. Again, it's going to make that AGM run that much more streamlined if you do get those questions. And it also gives you an opportunity to use factual statistical information, which you're not going to know off the top of your head when someone's asking you a question. But if you have preempted that question, you might know it. And then you're going to give a much better answer.
And it also kind of helps a little bit with knowing your audience, right? If you know your audience, you can probably guess what kind of questions they're going to answer and how long a meeting they want to have, among other things. So, does your audience want to have a long or a short AGM? Do they think they want to have a long AGM when what they really want is a long period of time after the AGM to have a chat? Are you going to have an issues with getting people to register or attend in person without some kind of enticement, like, I don't know, dogs to pat or food and drink or a networking opportunity? This is also why a lot of clients do actually hold their AGM during their annual conference. They have a captive audience. It's easy to make quorum, and you're kind of doing all of the year's things in one place. So just make sure that what you're planning matches the expectation of your members in terms of time, location, and platform. The AGM is a really, really good opportunity to provide strategic communication, but in particular to lay out and remind your members of what your strategic plan is and to review the activities that you've done during the year. Make sure the updates are purposeful and positive. That said, only positivity can become toxic at times. If your association is struggling and you need to say something about it, say it. If it's that you need more volunteers, then say it. Put a call out for volunteers. Don't feel like you have to shy away from bad news. You might want to scaffold it in a certain way, but don't feel like you have to shy away from it.
And lastly, a main point that we don't want it to arise, but from time to time it does, is problem handling. And tying back into our first point, be prepared. If problems arise, know what to do to handle them. Have a plan. Understand the Constitution for voting procedures, requirements for passing a motion, that sort of thing, and complaints if your Constitution states that. Understand the obligations to answer member queries or not at an AGM. Have backup in place for AV problems, hybrid, face-to-face risks that could arise, you know, any of that. And have multiple administrators and board members present so that if something does go wrong, you've got a lot of people there, hands on deck, who can assist if needed.
Folks, thank you all so much for joining us to watch this webinar. Hopefully you've gained some good ideas and a little bit of bit more confidence for your next annual general meeting. If you're still not sure, you can always come to the association specialists. We'd love to help.